An entitled jerk tries to scam my company by working the system and demanding a refund that we definitely could not give him. But after being treated so poorly by this guy, I decided to get some revenge by reporting him for fraud and eventually getting him fired from his job. Here's what happened. So I used to work on the retentions department of an ISP back in the day. While many people called genuinely wanting to cancel their phone service, just as many knew that retentions was more than that. The ISP, let's call them Red Phone, had two different departments. I worked on retentions 1, where we did a lot of fixing bills and offering small discounts and slightly cheaper phones to customers who said they wanted to leave. Retentions 2 was for customers who were in the process of porting their numbers, and the worst thing they offered was a 50% discount for a couple of years with a decent phone for free. Now this happened roughly 10, maybe 12 years ago when roaming was straight up highway robbery. Now at this point, let me introduce you to the executive. I got the call, did my little introductory spiel, and I immediately discovered that this guy was the most entitled piece of garbage I'd ever had the displeasure to speak to. He said he was a very important executive who traveled a lot for work, but the bill he got was ridiculous, and I had to solve it for him or he was going to cancel his service. I then muted him so he heard nothing, but I could still hear what he said, and while I checked his account, I could hear him gloat to his girlfriend that he's getting the bill credited because he knows how to play the system. And sure, he was definitely a jerk, but he wasn't wrong. This guy was a pro at playing Red Phone. He had the highest phone plan the company offered, which was around 90 euros at the time for one line, but paid 30 euros per month because he had discounts from both departments stacked on top of each other. His plan allowed him to get what at the time was a super expensive phone for basically nothing at Retentions 2. He had gotten the super shiny customer status and the super shiny customer service line, which usually meant a customer was averaging a 300 euro monthly bill, despite the fact that he was only paying 30 euro. Now he was also not wrong about this bill being ridiculous. He'd visited several European countries, got a 600 euro bill, called up customer service, and said he had not known that roaming was so expensive, and that no one had warned him when he told us he was traveling overseas. The company had a policy that the first time a customer complained about something, we could refund them, specifically if the complaint was that the customer had not been informed about extra charges. So the representative informed him about roaming cost and refunded him all the roaming charges, leaving him the bill at 30 euros. The second month comes around and he kept using the phone overseas and racked up a 1,500 euro bill. He calls customer service and they tell him they can't refund him again, and he says he wants to cancel his account then, and then he gets transferred to me. He was then demanding that we credited his roaming charges again, because if we can do it once, we can do it again, and also because roaming prices were awful. Now I told him I could not do that, so he then wanted me to open a claim and escalate it. Now I refused again because there was no one to escalate to, and he wasn't going to get that credited. Well, he insisted that he wasn't hanging up until I escalated the issue because he wasn't informed, and if I kept the call going for much longer, he was going to charge the company for his time because he was a busy man. Now at this point, I'd been working there long enough that if they were just nice or even normal to me, I would try my absolute best to help them out. But if you're a jerk, then sorry, you can just get lost. If the customer refuses to hang up, then I can hang up. But this guy though, he had gone way past being a jerk, and I was really pissed off. I couldn't be a jerk back, but he had been messing around and I could make sure that he definitely was going to find out. So I told him okay, since he was so insistent, I would open a claim to refund him the 1,500 euro bill, and I muted him while I opened the claim. This jerk was again gloating to his girlfriend about how clever he was because he was going to get the bill refunded too. Meanwhile, I was copy-pasting the notes from the previous month's claim where the representative had written that they've informed the customer of roaming charges in all the countries that he would be visiting. Also, when it comes to stacking discounts, that's definitely not a thing. He had to spam the Retention 1's call centers with so many calls until he got a newbie of some kind that was lost enough to apply another discount over his Retention 2's discount that he already had. And he had not read the terms and conditions of the accounts, but I had. Trying to defraud the company was grounds for service termination. I got the claim number, I flagged down my supervisor, and I told her to please send it to headquarters in the daily report so that fraud could examine the account. So I told the guy that the claim had been opened, but also that since it was obvious he was trying to work the company's policy, the claim had been flagged to be reviewed by fraud, and it was likely his account would be terminated. Well, this guy went from entitled to worried in about 2 seconds and asked me to please close the claim. But it's like, sorry dude, can't do that. You wanted a claim open? Well, congratulations, it's now open. At the end of the day, this guy actually ended up getting fired from his job, and I've honestly never felt better about getting revenge on anybody in my life. Yeah, that's some solid revenge because this guy literally was working the system. Like, he already got away with this once, why on earth would he think he could get away with it again? So good for you for getting this taken care of and for putting this guy in his place. Because if he was just reasonable, even in the slightest, then all of this could have been avoided from the very start. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to AmITheJerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. My job strung me along for 3 years, promising a promotion that I never ended up getting. And now, after I found out that I got fired, I feel completely dejected, and at this point, I seriously don't know what to do. Here's what happened. To start things out, all names in this story have been changed. In May of 2021, I got a job as a server at a popular local restaurant. It is a promote from within business, and everyone knows the goal is to be promoted to bartender since they make a ridiculous amount of money most nights. Now, I had 6 months of prior serving experience. There's no tip pool, and the starting pay is $2.13 an hour. I was hired during a mass hiring after they reopened post-pandemic, along with a 21-year-old male by the name of Luke who had no serving experience, a few girls my age, and some industry lifers. Even though I was hired as a server, they started me as a host making about $10 an hour. My shifts were rotated with another recent hire for 20 months who was a 20-year-old female, and there were promises that I would eventually be added to the serving schedule like all the other recent hires. Now, I didn't protest because I needed the job, and I knew the serving and bartending money would be worth it. Finally, I was added to the serving schedule, and although they were Monday and Tuesday shifts while still hosting, I was happy. But eventually, I began to feel these shifts were unfair. Everyone else worked the busy weekend shifts and were making cash, but I was struggling. Well, I spoke to one of my managers by the name of Donald about getting better shifts in general, but he told me I had to earn the right to serve on weekends and that the other servers were better than me. And by the way, these were the same servers who had been hired with me and all got to train while I was stuck hosting. After months of proving myself, I finally got a decent schedule with weekend shifts. And this is around the same time that I learned that Luke was promoted to lead server, which is one step below bartender. He was making $5 an hour and hanging out at the golf course with our managers outside of work. I mean, why was he promoted while I struggled for 6 months? And to me, it seemed like sexism. Well, one night after a beer with one of my managers, a person by the name of Cameron told me to reach out if I ever felt unfairly treated due to my gender. Well, the next day, I took him up on the offer and I told him that I felt it was sexism that Luke had been given opportunities that I and the other women servers had not been given, and that he had been hanging out with the male managers outside of work. Well, Cameron took huge offense that I was accusing him of sexism and told me I was welcome to quit if I was unhappy with my workplace. And ever since this conversation, he barely speaks to me. Since talking to him was a dead end, I took the same conversation up with my female manager by the name of Beatrice. She said sexism is just part of the industry and I needed to accept it. She also claimed that he wasn't even promoted because of sexism, but because he closed most weekends and had proved himself, and these were shifts that I'd been begging for since I started but were simply given to him. And while I was still frustrated, I decided to accept it and just move on. But over the next year, I made it my goal to prove my value to this company by picking up every closing shift that I could. I was going to be the best server possible, and I was going to work as much as I could. I eventually got to the point where I was working full-time closing shifts while balancing full-time school so I could finally have that bartending position I've been working for. I was also diligent about having regular conversations with each of my managers about how hard I'm working to be promoted to bartender one day and what I keep doing to reach that goal. And eventually, they even promoted me to lead server alongside with Luke. Unfortunately, rumors were swirling that the female employees were feeling uncomfortable by Luke's incessant flirtation with them, getting them drunk at work and then offering to drive them home, taking them out to bars while drunk, and just putting them in uncomfortable situations and much more. As a lead server, they approached me as a liaison between them and management to communicate on their behalf. Now, conversations with management were unpleasant to say the least. I was then accused of trying to steal Luke's bar promotion, vouching for unreliable employees, and lying because I wouldn't give them the names of the women who asked me to speak on their behalf. They told me that at the end of the day, if nothing happened on the restaurant's property, then they can't fire him. I was ultimately given the unfriendly advice to keep unnecessary drama out of the workplace. After all was said and done, Luke continued receiving special treatment, and I was reassigned to Monday and Tuesday along with my hosting shift. Fast forward and another year of serving and balancing school passes, and I just keep my head down. I'm working diligently, and I'm avoiding conversations with management, while also still holding out hope for the bartending promotion. A lot more happened during this year that I won't detail in this post, but I did write a report to the Better Business Bureau regarding some serious ethical issues with management and their staff, including managers sleeping with young employees, excessive drinking on the clock, and being verbally awful towards employees. Well, one day, our owner by the name of Brady drunkenly approached me to apologize for the hard time I've had to work at this restaurant and thank me for my loyalty in sticking it out. Since I am a lead server, he asked me to email him a list of general and specific issues that I had heard other employees express concern about because he wants to ensure his employees' well-being from here on out. Well, fast forward, and after reading my email, Brady confronted me at work a week later, while drunk of course, alongside our general manager by the name of Kingston. They took me upstairs alone and they pressed me for the names of problem managers and the employees I referenced in my email, despite me stating that I wasn't comfortable sharing names. After an hour and a half of this interrogation, I finally broke down and cried. Brady then scoffed and walked off and said maybe the restaurant industry isn't for you. But you know what? Even still, I stayed, still hoping to get that bartender promotion. I had already dedicated so much time and energy to this goal that I wasn't going to give up. And after this, I worked even harder and even longer and just kept my mouth shut. 3 years in total go by, and I graduate college and go on vacation with my mom. And when I come back, I find that 2 new bartenders I don't recognize from our serving staff have both started training. And at this point, I'm just completely devastated. What is so wrong with me that they never want me behind the bar? I know everything there is to know about this restaurant at this point, and I've trained literally every coworker of mine on the floor. I then have a conversation with another one of my managers by the name of Hannah, and I tell her I need to take a mental break for just a couple months, but would be ready to come back this fall to start fresh again. Now she says all right, and I leave in better spirits. Well, you'll never guess what happened next. I open up the scheduling app last month just to pick up some shifts after my hiatus, only to find that I was logged off. They had apparently fired me after over 3 years as their lead server, without any notice or any conversation. And right now, I'm left feeling worthless, disappointed, frustrated, and angry. And right now, I feel so tired that it's not even worth fighting at this point, because right now, I really don't know what to do. Okay, first and foremost, this place does not sound like a fun place to work. They have basically held this carrot over your head and led you on that being a bartender is where you want to be, and then they've never given it to you and given it to other people. So yeah, I think there might be some sexism or even just favoritism going on in some kind of way, because this treatment seems very biased. Now, on the other hand, I think you do need to realize that you left for a month for vacation, only to come back and then leave again for several months. So on that end, I kind of understand why they would kind of kick you to the curb. I'm not saying that it's right, but I do kind of get it to an extent. You already had a month-long vacation, and then you come back to work, get upset that someone has the position you wanted, and then you take several more months off. If I was a manager, I'd be like, wait a second, what's going on here? And sure, you have been there for 3 years. You've been dedicated to getting your job done and proving yourself to these people, but from my experience, if a manager can fire somebody, they will. And it really sucks, and it's not fair. And it seems like this restaurant has a lot of turnaround because clearly there's new people coming and going all the time, and they obviously don't value the hard work that you put in, so they don't see you as a good asset in the slightest, and that just sucks entirely. So no, it's not right, but I do kind of get it, even though it's awful behavior and it's just so unacceptable. But truly, I think you can find a much better job than this, because these people sound like they suck to work for, and I really think that you deserve so much better. My boyfriend broke up with me suddenly and has never given me the chance to have any closure with our relationship, and now I'm considering flying across the country just so I can have one last conversation with him to try and find the closure that I desperately need. Here's what happened. Okay, so to start things out, he broke up with me the month before because he was struggling with mental health and thought it would be good to move home to his family in Texas, as we lived in the Northeast at the time. We agreed that we would both work on ourselves for a bit, and then we would get back together much stronger. I wanted what was best for him, and despite trying, it was becoming clear that I couldn't help him. So we broke up and then continued to support each other through the sadness of the breakup. We loved each other so much. I was so sure that he would move home, feel better, and we would get back together quickly, that I wouldn't even call him my ex-boyfriend, and I would just call him my first love. Well, a month later, my brother overdosed and was in a coma. The doctors told us he was brain dead, and that he would have to donate his organs in a few days. Despite trying to handle it on my own, I missed my boyfriend and decided to call and beg him to come, but he said that he couldn't, which pretty much destroyed me. And that was the last time that we talked on the phone, and I was shocked. Him refusing to come was the last thing I expected in the world, especially based on our bond and how I thought that we cared about each other, especially considering everything I knew about about him over the past 4 years and what I would do for him if he asked me. We went from talking every day to never talking again. After the day my brother passed, he just completely disappeared. He never reached out to me or any of our mutual friends to check in on how I was doing. He didn't reach out to any of my family who he was very close to, and he didn't reach out about the funeral or anything. All of it just hurt so bad. The fact that he cared so little when I cared so much hurt so bad. But I think the shock of it all hurt the most. The fact that he was showing me someone I've never met. It made me worried about him. I couldn't understand how he could treat me that way, which made me worried that he wasn't doing well. I was extremely hurt and angry at first, but 2 months later, the anger disappeared and I forgave him and I missed him. I thought there must be a reason as to why he couldn't comfort me at the time, and it must have been a good one because I couldn't have been so wrong about someone for so long. I trusted him with my life and I wanted to trust myself. Well, I decided to reach out to reconnect and try to talk about what happened with us. He wouldn't respond to my text messages or calls, so I decided to email him, which was a special thing that we used to do. He responded to my heartfelt letter with complete apathy, which terrified me again. He basically said that he was not willing to talk to me, but he did wish me the best. And this was the complete opposite of anything we ever said, and again, it sent me spinning. Up to this point, the last time I saw him in person was a month before my brother passed, when he visited my family for a week after we decided to take the break. We hugged and kissed with love before he left to catch his airplane home. He has never done anything but love me in person, and everything disappointing has happened over text messaging, which is just so confusing and difficult for me. Like, I can't really believe that any of it was him. The only reason I think he still cares about me though is through his music, which is how we used to communicate when we were first getting together. He has been making playlists, and I have been listening as if they are his words. Many of them convey that he still loves me too, and that he is also confused about everything that has happened, but I have no way of knowing if he knows or listens. And I know this is all crazy, but I don't know what to do because I feel so stuck. I can't believe that the person I used to trust with my life is the only person I'm terrified to reach out to. I want to talk, but I'm too scared to reach out over text messaging after the last 2 experiences that I had. Nobody understands, but I just need to see him in person. I need to see him to either hug him and heal or just to say goodbye. He just started a graduation program in Austin, and I'm wondering, should I fly down there and stand outside of his school? My hope would be that he saw me and we both run into each other's arms and cry and heal. My fear would be that he would see me and just look at me apathetically and ignoring that we ever existed. So should I fly down there and try to find some kind of closure? What should I do? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and say what I think all of us are thinking, but this is crazy talk. Like, seriously, this went from I'm mourning the loss of my relationship to hey, I'm a creepy stalker in like 2 paragraphs. Literally, you went from like, oh man, this really sucks to, oh, I'm gonna fly down to his school and stand outside of it. Like, what are you talking about? That is a horrible idea. You are literally trying to equate his playlist into some kind of like love letter to you. And by the way, why do you need closure? He already responded to your email. He said, hey, I don't want to talk about it, but I wish you the best. That is all the answer that you need. The subtext there is that, hey, he doesn't want to be with you and he doesn't want to talk about this. He wants to move on with his life, and that's that. But seriously, let's reflect on your behavior real quick. You want to fly down there and stand outside of his school under this delusional hope that he's going to run out to you and you're going to heal together? Like, that is not going to happen. That is not going to happen at all. If I had an ex-girlfriend who was standing outside my school and was like, I just want to talk, I want to see you in person, let's figure this out with a hug. Like, you've either watched way too many movies or you really think that that's how this is going to go down. Because what's really going to happen is this guy's going to look at you and be like, what in the world are you doing here? He's not going to run into your arms and be like, oh my God, you're right. I'm so glad you're here. Let's figure it out together, you and me. Like, no, man, that's not going to happen. He's going to be like, please leave. Why are you here? I don't like you. And there's a good chance he's going to have another girlfriend already with him in some kind of way. Like, why would you do this to yourself? So no, do not fly down to Austin and see him. Don't go to his graduate program and stand outside of his school. None of that's a good idea. That's an insane idea, and it's not going to do you any good because this relationship is over. And I'm sorry that you're hurting, but you need to accept that and move on with your life. Am I the jerk for kicking my sister out of my house after she screamed at my wife for trying to remodel the backyard? Here's what happened. Okay, so my sister has lived with me ever since she was a teen mom. She has her own little space for her and her kids, and for the record, this is my house as I own it. My fiance by the name of Amy moved in, and since Amy's my wife, she can remodel the home as she likes. Amy and I have been together for 4 years, and my sister has lived with me for 6. My sister and Amy got into this huge argument over ripping out my grass where her kids play, play, and doing so to make a garden that will bloom next spring. And Amy had discussed this with me, and I definitely agreed upon it. Now, because of our different schedules, we forgot about my sister and telling her about the garden. Amy took a few days off from work to meet with the contractors for the initial digging up of the yard, and this happened while I was at work. Well, my sister made a scene with the contractors and yelled at Amy. Amy then told my sister that it's time for her to move out and get on with her own life, and that I've been supporting her and her kids for far too long. A neighbor eventually got involved and called the police, saying that Amy wasn't authorized to have the contractors dig up the yard. Amy was asked to leave the property by the police with an overnight bag, and this was supervised by the police because I was not reachable at work. My sister then told me, can you believe that idiot just ripping up the yard like that? Now, at this point, I have to leave work and take my hour commute home just to deal with my sister. I told her it's time to move out, and she should have never been involved with the garden. It wasn't her place, and it's not her home. My sister was complaining that her boys love to play in that patch of grass, and she can't believe that I would make changes to her play area without consulting her. And Amy is really pissed off at my sister and the neighbor. The neighbor tried to apologize, but I had to tell the neighbor there is no more coming over because she will be trespassed, and she had no business calling the police and making the situation worse. The neighbor explained that she didn't know Amy was authorized to make those changes, and I told the neighbor, well, that's too bad. She's now banned from the property, even though she's friends with my sister and their kids play together. I told my sister that her and the boys have to go, and she needs to be out by the new year, or I will take legal action against her. Well, my sister keeps crying and apologizing, but her action showed Amy what her married life would look like with my sister living with us. And because I'm putting my wife first, my sister absolutely has to go. Honestly, I think you're doing the right thing. First of all, you're definitely not the jerk here because this is completely out of line. Your sister had no business talking to your wife like that. Like, this is not your sister's home. So for her to freak out on your wife like that, you know, the person you're gonna marry and that lady's future sister-in-law, like, that is so rude and toxic. I understand that she wants to live there because it's convenient, but at least for your sanity and Amy's sanity, there's no way your sister can live there and stay with you guys, because you have it 100% correct. This really is a window into your future with this home. Like, she absolutely would be a nightmare to deal with, and I don't blame you for kicking her out. So hopefully all of this goes well, because I think you've given her ample time to figure her life out. And the sooner your sister leaves, I think the happier the both of you will be. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you want some chill music to put on in the background, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.